Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Com Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. In a minute, I'll be joined by Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders, as we discuss the Commanders offseason again, but it's really more so from a couple topics. Unfinished business for the Commanders, but also what if they went heavy on offense in the first couple of rounds of the draft? Would you be okay? And we talk about that. We talk about both scenarios, but why it's kind of appealing to look at it that way, like getting a couple more offensive weapons. What would that do? Would you be okay with that? Anyways, Bram and I talk about that. On Monday, I'll be joined by Tressway, of course, the Commanders punter. Had a really good interview with him on Thursday, so I'm going to play that for you on Monday. Then we're going to get back into some more draft talk over the next couple weeks as we prepare for the 29th pick in the draft that Washington has, getting you ready for that, kind of going over each position, like making the case for different positions, et cetera. So anyways, that's what's coming up. Nothing else from me. So here's my conversation with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. All right, Bram. So I obviously spent a couple of days down at the owners' meetings this year. One thing I'm curious from your perspective too, because how you viewed just what came out of there this year compared to the last couple of years. As a reporter, it's like it's dramatically different what we're focusing on these days.
I mean, some of the rule changes kind of popped up. I did like, that Peters and Quinn both spoke. I didn't think there was a lot of news really out of most of it. Brandon Coleman really was the one that probably stood out the most of everything that they said about what's going on. And the don't worry, Terry's going to be here a while. Like that's really the other one, I guess, that really came out. But I don't know, maybe from your perspective, you can tell me. Not much. I mean, it was pretty quiet, I thought.
No, and that's what's different. And it's funny because someone else said, like, listen, if we're focusing on topic X, like look at how different it is for this organization compared to the last few years. Because like last year, so many questions about quarterback. And just the quest was to find out, like I remember talking to coaches last year, like, hey, is it Jaden or Drake? Right. And I remember it was almost unanimous to the coach I talked to that it was Jaden Daniels, and it wasn't close for some of them. And that, but then it's like, what clues can we get out of Peters and Quinn to see which way they're going? And even for me, like I kind of knew that it was going to be Jaden based on a conversation I had with Quinn, just based on what he said. But like, in the year before, it's the team sale. And the year before that, it's about investigations. And it's been so crazy that they're just like, yeah, it's kind of a normal team now and just normal situation. Yeah. They've got what they need. Now they just have to build on what they don't have. It was very different, very different. It's a good place to be for them, right?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I mean, I would think that, as a sports talk show host, like what fills the void? And, I mean, it's just different, right?
Yeah. And now you're hitting at the heartstrings. Like, what am I going to talk about tomorrow? You're right. What am I going to talk about tomorrow?
Yeah. But now the big thing here is, though, can they take that next step? And so we know what they've done in free agency. We know the draft is coming up.
Yeah.
You, like, unfinished business. What's tops on the list for you with the unfinished business here?
I mean, I still think there's position groups to address. And obviously the draft is next, and those top two picks are going to be really interesting to watch if it's just those two. I know Adam Peters put out there that they could trade back, and if they get a dance partner, I'm sure they'd be wide open to that with only 5 picks going into the draft, and even for next year too, they've already given up 2 for next year. So, I think like they're probably open to any and all, possibilities if the right partner comes along. But to me, like, I still feel like a running back's going to happen one way or the other, probably through the draft. I feel like that's going to happen early. Edge rush obviously stands out that they don't have a young edge rusher, albeit I am very curious how they're going to use Javon Kinlaw and the others that they brought in. And do they feel the need to get a young edge rusher as much as everybody on the outside feels it? I'm not totally sure. I think corner could be addressed with one more player. I think safety could be addressed potentially with one more player. And then now, if this Coleman news that they're going to start him at right tackle, I'm less inclined to believe an offensive lineman is going to be taken very early in the draft, but I don't take that off the table either.
Right. And I said on here too that that was always my understanding that that's why I kept saying I think it's going to be right tackle. But if you get a guy who's a really good guard, I have no problem just bolstering that line even more. But I think you
Yeah.
could probably wait a little bit for that. So I think that would, and then even with like Kinlaw, I do believe they see him more inside. And so I don't think they would look at him anyways. Even if they put him outside, it's still more about run than I think as a guy who could be what you need him to be. So I do think the edge has to still be on that list. Get a young, I think it's good to have a little bit more youth on that front to go with the Johnny Newton or whatever, because it's a veteran group. So I would like to add, if I'm them, add that guy. So, and I think they'll be able to do that. So,
I mean, off the two big moves in the offseason where it's left tackle and wide receiver, so they bolstered the offense, it
right,
almost feels logical that the draft is going to go on the defensive side of the ball. But I would make an argument, especially if you look at their schedule this year with the two divisions that they're
yes,
playing, the AFC West, the NFC North, that it's going to be very difficult with what looks to be high-powered offenses kind of
correct.
littered throughout the year. There's Philadelphia, there's those two divisions. Miami is the extra AFC game, which can be a very high-scoring team. So I mean, I think you're looking at offense at a premium. I could see the urge to go get a running back and try to load up on that side of the ball. It wouldn't surprise me.
So what if you go out and this would require probably a trade back to get another pick, running back and a receiver.
Sure. I mean, possibility too. I think it's all open, I felt, after last year, they reset the roster and they're kind of doing it again, because they had a lot of, short-term deal guys. And if you look at what they're doing right now, they may do it again, come next year, because they have a lot of short-term deal guys, hopefully with less roster spots that need to be addressed, in 2026 than they are in
Right.
2025. But like, when you look at like the choices they have to make, I felt like this decision would have to come next year and maybe not this year. Do you decide to load up on one side of the ball or the other? And off of what their options were and the players that they acquired, it does feel like it's just tilting towards, okay, why don't we load up on offense and see if we can produce a top five, top three offense? And if we can do that, then even if our defense is a little bit better than it was, but it's not a top five group because they don't have the playmaking ability on that side of the ball, it should be good enough to win a lot. So I don't know how they're thinking about roster building at this point. I think as you look across the board, I think it's just wide open to them to go find as many best players available as they can and fill them in as needed. But I would argue that it's possible, if you look at the construct of the roster right now, that if you go even a little deeper into offense, you may end up with something that's, ranked in the top five or better. And that might be good enough to get you back to the places you want to get to.
I also think when you look at their schedule, Kansas City, Minnesota, Chargers, there's some good defenses coming on the schedule as well, in addition to some of the Giants bolstering their defense some more, right? So, I would be okay. I mean, you need to get another dynamic playmaker on there, whether it's a receiver or a running back or both. And to me, if you trade back and get another pick in those first four rounds, be great if you could get both, because then it's now you can threaten in so many ways, and it does help your defense. The more you have the ball, the more you score, the more it helps them out. And it's funny because like Nick Sirianni was at the owners meetings talking about the tush push and how like that play got three other coaches their jobs. Two were on offense, but Jonathan Gannon's a defensive coach. But the more the Eagles held the ball, the better it was for his defense. So you can make that case as well, that it certainly helps him. And that's why you go for the best player available theory. So I think that would be, I'd be okay with that, because to maintain what they did last year. And plus, the other part is, Bram, that you look at like all the long drives they went on last year, all the fourth down conversions they needed to sustain things. Like it's hard to do that year over year. So get guys who can get chunk plays and put you in a better position in a
Yes.
hurry. And you have a quarterback who can do all that. Imagine if you have McLaurin out here, let's say they, Ty Felton from Maryland, guy who's speed guy on the outside. You get him, third round, whatever, fourth, whatever it is. And you have a back, and I'll get my guy, Henderson or Judkins from Ohio State, one of those guys in the backfield, and you have Deebo Samuel. How are you going to defend that, right? And I think that it just leaves some more possibilities. And I also think it could, if you went that route, then let's say something happens to Zach Ertz and you don't have the same threat at tight end, but you still have playmakers on that offense. You just adjust what you do. So, there is we can make a strong argument for either side of the ball, but I think it can be fun. It can be enticing to think along the lines of giving it even more firepower.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm leaning that way a little bit, but I totally see the defensive side that it needs, not like with the offense, it needs more playmakers over
Right,
there. Like
for sure.
they preach ball is life. One of the things I think that probably was a disappointment from the season for them, and there aren't many of them, was they didn't really produce the turnovers that they
Right.
talked about that they were going to produce throughout the year. And as they've gone through the offseason, so Jeremy Chip comes in. They upgraded at corner. They're hoping for healthy Marshawn Lattimore. They believe Javon Kinlaw is going to have the best football in front of them. They're betting on that pretty hard. Hopefully, they're right about that. We'll see how it goes. But again, I'll look across the board and I'll go, okay, who are the playmaking players over there that are going to bring the ball to life and is going to get the turnovers for them? And I'm not sure that I totally see that yet
I know.
either. So I do think that there's some room here to find a couple of game-changing type players. And I don't blame them for not finding him in free agency. I don't think they existed. So you are subject to what your options are. And I didn't think their options around the league this year. This was not a really strong free agent class, which is why I think they went the route that they did to fill some of the holes that they had to fill. They weren't going to get them in free agency, or they'd have to pay a premium that they didn't want to pay. So, I think they handled this correctly, but they do have work to do, I think is what we're getting at here.
No, I think you're right though. The ball is life credo, like they did not live up to that, and you need that. And I think if you go out and get a corner, I think the first thing they have to have are those ball skills because they want to take that ball away. Or if you can find a playmaking safety or an edge guy who disrupts the passer, who can maybe lead to some of those. Maybe if you get an edge guy who can listen, man, you're not getting at 29, you're going to get what you get. And as an edge
That's
rusher, if
right.
you're a true impact guy, you're going top 10. And it's hard for even those top 10 guys to have an instant impact in terms of sacks because it's a hard thing to become a good pass rusher in the NFL. But can you get a guy that, if you have creative schemes and if you can create situations for them, does that lead to more chances for other people to make plays? That's the other thing, because you're right. Like they need more playmakers on defense. But if you're sitting there and it's like, oh, well, we have to get a corner, but I really like this receiver, then you take the receiver and you make your team better versus just trying to get a spot because you need it. But if you're right. Like if there's a guy that can make plays, but then that's where you go. And I think especially on defense. So it's funny because we're kind of talk ourselves into whatever side of the ball because I think they could use both sides, and you can
Yeah.
envision what an offense like that with Jaden Daniels at quarterback could look like, and also then it takes some pressure off him to have to make as many plays as he did last year on his own, and then that in turn saves the body from some wear and tear down the road. So
Yeah,
like
I mean,
there's
also,
there's a
I'll hear them out on this. Like, what was their biggest weakness on defense? Run defense, specifically
right,
on the edge.
right,
Did the players they bring in help solve that? I don't know if solve's the right word, but they're better. They're
they're better.
deeper. Like, I like some of these players they brought in. It's a lot of rotational players for sure.
Right.
But between Kinlaw and I really like Wise, maybe they are better on the edge. Their corner group, if Marshawn's healthy, way better than it was a year ago. They didn't give up a ton of big plays. It was the ground game that really got them a year ago. So if that's improved enough and they're still not, getting the breaks with all the balls and the turnovers and all that stuff, and their pass defense is better because Marshawn's healthy, Jones is an upgrade from what they had on the other side of the field, gives them flexibility with Sanders still now to move him around, do what they want to do, then I will buy into this is a good defense. Maybe not a great one, but a good one. And if they have a good defense with an overwhelming offense, then who knows how the season ends up.
Right. And I would also I would like to see them somehow get a young corner in. Obviously, if you draft a corner, is going to be young. I'd like to see them draft a corner in this if possible to give them more depth there and also to give them maybe because I like what Jones adds. I like Sanders still. Igbenogany was a good, did well for them last year, but they're all smaller on the smaller scale, right? So give me another big outside corner, maybe somebody who has ball skills that you can help develop. Maybe they don't. And I think with Jones and Sanders still, you don't have to have a guy who comes in and starts right away. Like you have guys who can go in there and start in those roles and be effective for sure. But if you can get another guy in that third, fourth round area, if you're able to do that, then to develop somebody, right? Like that's how you develop depth is by hitting on guys in those rounds, which is what Peters did well in San Francisco. So I would like to see that. But again, the playmaker could be a safety who's able to move around a lot and maybe
Yeah.
down in the box has some versatility, but you do have to find, and it's hard to find those guys, but you've got to find a way to produce more of those plays than you have in the past for sure. Because that was a big, if, again, you can't count on certain things happening year over year. So you've got to look to add what you don't have, which is why, like, yeah, the offense is really good, but man, if you can add this and this, now maybe it's more dangerous. Or what it does is, let's say McLaurin has to miss 2 or 3 games, or let's say Debo misses 2 or 3 games. But if you got this, and this as well, you can offset that by, and Kingsbury's very good at being creative and using what he has and being able to veer away from what you're doing here with this group and do this with this group. So that's why I would, that would be enticing to me for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like we didn't see what KJ Osborne can do in this offense. He's back on the
Yeah.
roster again, and I like some people were a little surprised, that they brought him back. But he was really good in Minnesota. He had a really
Yeah.
good run up there.
Solid. Yeah.
So he comes back. Noah Brown comes back. Michael Gallup comes in. You don't know what he can bring back here. Like I need to see it first. I mean, he did retire, so I know he said like, I was in a different space and all that stuff, but I need to see it. I think they do
For
too, which
sure.
is why he got the contract he got. Like,
Right.
you're gonna have to prove it to us that you do want to be here. You do want to, play at this level. We know what you can do, but you got to show it. And so think about that for a second. I mean, between Osborne, Brown, and Gallup, they have 3 receivers that are all making less than De'Ami Brown was
Right.
making.
Right. Right. Good
Like
point.
they have potential high upside value in a couple of cases with players that were big time veterans. Gallup was a really good number 2 at his like height in Dallas. Noah Brown, we saw what he did a year ago.
Mhm.
KJ Osborne, I don't know what he can do in this offense, and that's why they wanted to give it another whirl. They got all 3 of those guys at less than what De'Ami Brown got. I mean, they've got a deal in that room.
March Madness is here, and every game has a chance to cash in. From the first tip-off to the Final Four, every night promises high-stakes matchups, wild finishes, big-time betting opportunities, and MyBookie's Bet and Get is back to sweeten the deal. Place a cash bet on March Madness and get a surprise reward, free bets, cash back, bonus clips. You never know what's coming next. Whether it's a number 1 seed rolling or an underdog shocking the world, smart bettors know the real money is made one game at a time. Listen up. Sign up now with promo code MM50 and you can boost your bankroll with a deposit bonus designed to help you make the most of your money. If you don't want a bonus, that's okay too. Just make sure you let them know that we sent you. Bet on every game, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. Use promo code MM50.
I know that there's some receivers that they certainly like, and so I think, that's why I'd be okay if you added a speed guy. Listen, everybody wants a 6'4" guy who can run, right? And there are a
Yeah.
couple of guys in this draft who have those measurements who can run. But if you can add speed, that's always a desired trait. And
Yep.
I think, and it doesn't, and if you're 6'1", 6 foot, like that's Terry McLaurin, 6', 6'1", and he can run. So if you can add a guy like that on the other side, and then it just opens up more of what you can do offensively. And this is where, it's funny because I look at Jaden Daniels, and it's always with quarterbacks, the spots you get placed in. And if he had gone to Chicago, I think Jaden Daniels would be good because of the work he puts in. But man, did this group maximize him with what they did with having a guy like Kingsbury as a coordinator who is adaptable and clearly listens to those around him, whether it's coaches, players, whatever, and fixes that offense to the talent that he has. And I think so the combination of Daniel's talent, adding a little bit more, and this is what I'd hear from coaches down at the owners' meetings too, is like, well, Cliff, they would bring up Kingsbury when talking about like Daniel's year 1 to year 2 leap and just, and how like defense are going to combat it. But this guy's creative as a play caller. And I think that matters too. So if you put more talent with that creativity and that quarterback, it's like I said, kind of fun to watch these games even more next year.
Yeah, I mean, and then we just don't know what progression Daniels is going to make. I
Right.
mean, just think about what ground zero was. And like some people like to just focus on some kind of sophomore slump, but what if he gets better? You ever
Yes,
thought of
that's
that? What if he actually gets better?
well,
Like off of the best rookie season any quarterback's ever had. What if he actually gets better from that?
and it's funny because like better doesn't always mean like that. Well, I think he will get better one because I think it's just the work. It's the work that he puts in separates him from others, right? And the attention to detail of his work separates him from others. And then you add an organization that I think has done a good job around him. Also helps with David Blau, with Pritchard, with Kingsbury, right? And just what they're trying to do. So if you give him more tools around him, like look what he did with guys who De'Ami Brown hadn't done anything. Zacchaeus was coming off a year where he didn't do anything. Noah Brown did a nice job, but he was having a career year. Terry had a great year with him. If you give him more around him in those spots, how much more danger would look for him? That's how you can also help him get better because he's gonna do the work on his own. And every year is different. But I certainly would expect him to get better. And what that means, I don't know, but I would be
Yeah.
shocked if I'm going to be like the league's not going to figure him out. They're not because this is one thing that even at the owners meetings we talked to Dan Quinn about, and I talked to others about it. Like because of his ability as a passer, this was not a fluke. This was not a
Yeah.
guy like, oh, if you just take away this, then you're going to force him to do this. Like no, he's really good at this. You have to combat this. And then it's also like, can you do some things? And this is why when I had Ryan Porter on as quarterbacks coach, like maybe they get a read on the footwork, but if he's able to alter his footwork a little bit on the same route, now you can. And so now you can do things, but like they're really good at playing chess with him. And I think, and he's able to play that. That's the key. Like he's able to grasp what they need him to do and how to get better and the progressions, et cetera. That's what makes the difference. So again, I know we're going to hear a lot about the question about that, but he's going to get better.
Yeah, he's gonna get better. I'm waiting to see what the schedule looks like because I feel like there's gonna be a lot of night games. Like it's gonna be a different year this year. They're gonna be a draw, so there's gonna be a lot of expectations on them. And we already went through that the schedule, I mean, right now looks hard. The NFC North probably the best top to bottom division on paper in the NFL. And then they're playing the AFC West with 3 playoff teams a year ago. I mean, like it's gonna be a very, very, very. And Pete Carroll's coached the Raiders now. I mean, this is going to be a very, very, very difficult run they're going to have to go through. The Eagles have to do it too. Like that's the good
They
news.
all
The
have to
whole
do it right.
NFC, they all have to do it too. So it's not like we have this really hard schedule and they don't. But it is formidable. And that is why there is part of me that goes load up on offense, get a loaded up offense on one side of the ball. Let's see what we can do with it.
Or just and simply to me, it's don't focus on necessarily one or the other. Get really good players. Like this is where the luxury they're at. That with free agency, they got enough depth on the D line that you don't have to get the guy with the first pick. You did enough at receiver where you have depth. Now, again, I'd still like another guy there, but you have enough depth where you don't have to force the pick. But so take the best play. But my thing has always been if you want to build a good team, draft good players. And it's funny because Greg Williams, when he was here, would always say, and Ryan O'Halloran, who used to cover this team years ago, we'd always joke about it because Greg Williams was always like, you know what kind of players I like? Good football players. And that's
Yeah.
true. Like that's how you build a good roster. It's not by addressing needs in the draft. It's by adding good talent wherever they are. And if it means that they're at a spot where you have somebody, okay. But you're not, that you're not going to take a quarterback with the first pick, but pretty much any other spot, I'd say like, all right, I get it, and
Yeah.
I don't, in tight end, you're not taking it the first round either. But other than that, I'm all right with whatever they do because if it makes you better and if you can add those playmakers. But yeah, it absolutely would be if they could go out and get a couple more guys on offense. This thing would be I mean, it was fun to watch last year, Bram, but it would be even more fun. Like just think of how your voice will sound next year if you have that
Yeah.
talent to call.
Well, and then like look at the opponents every week and
Yes.
like consider, come on, we're getting 2 Monday Night Football games, 2 Sunday Night Football games. Like that's happening. That's happening next year.
Yeah. The question then is the international games too, and that's the one I don't know about yet. And I know that they're certainly in consideration for those. And I think the Athletic out of Kansas City said that the league was it's They had a report that said it was leaning toward the Chiefs and Chargers in Brazil, which I'm
Yeah.
be happy about. And I think they would be happy about that. But and that's not official yet, so we don't know. But I think that's also going to happen at some point. And then it's like the holidays they play on, the profile has raised. And it's funny because the biggest question I've been asked a lot lately when you see other reporters, like, how different is it? Like, and again, it's always like night and day. It's like, but night and day doesn't describe the difference in this organization from 2 years ago. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
so. But but yeah, I agree with you. Like, they're going to be a very desirable team for this team to be on the air, and and if you get more. Listen, you get guys on defense that can make plays, it makes them better. You get more guys on offense that can make plays, it makes them better. It does go back to, and I was talking about this with someone earlier about protecting Jaden Daniels. Well, the more talent you have around him, the more you do protect him. It's not just about the O-line, it's about adding more talent so he doesn't feel like he has to. I don't know that he feels like it. He can just do it, right? But if you get another speedster on the other side and he's open one-on-one down the field, he's throwing the ball. You don't have to
Yeah.
convince him of that. He's going to throw it. And then
Yeah.
you get more 40-yard chunk plays, kind of works in favor for him too. So yeah, that's how I would view it. But
Yep.
that's yeah. And so overall, where do you feel like they're at? Like we have kind of not a dead period, but leading up to the draft, and that's going to dominate the next few weeks. And we'll be talking a lot about the draft the next couple of weeks. But compared to where they are at the end of the season, forget the schedule because that we don't know how it really is going to play out and who's going to really be that good. But where they at? Do you feel like are they much better, or where do you feel?
I think offensively they're considerably better. I mean, they just put a all-pro left tackle on their team and an all-pro caliber wide receiver on their team. So, and the trickle-down effect of the Tunsil trade is immense. I mean, Coleman now moves to right tackle or guard eventually, but at least right tackle. It opens up the draft board for them. When Cosme comes back, you're going to start liking what you're seeing of that group as they put this thing together. They got a lot more depth there. I like the wide receiver room. If they added another one, I'm with you, but still, like, I feel like they're a running back away from adding one more explosive player on offense. So I think they're more formidable on that side of the ball, and by a lot, considerably. On defense, there is a little I want to wait and see. I want to see, is the Kinlaw deal what they think it is? And I hope that they're right about that. And I want to see how they use him. I think that's going to be very interesting.
Like I said, it's going to be, he's going to be played more inside. Like that's where he is. So, but in that, even within that playing inside, how do they use him in there? Like, is it more three? Is it over the nose? And what do they ask him to do in those roles? Or just because he's lining up at the same spot doesn't mean they're asking him to do the same things that somebody else did. So
I still think I think their D line is very deep, like all of a sudden. I thought they did a really good job to address the depth there. The cornerback room got kind of flipped over. I really like what they have there. Jeremy Chin might be the one that got away, but I like the replacement that they got in there. Could they use another couple of playmakers? And on the edge, at corner, at safety, I'll hear all of that out. And that might get addressed in the draft. I would say like the defense to me, year two system, definitely bolstered run defense, at least looks like it. I think, and the corners, if Lattimore is healthy, looks like a much more formidable group. I like what they got. I think they're a lot better. Are they an explosive turnover driving defense? Doesn't feel that way to me, but I'll be, they could prove me wrong with that if Lattimore goes out and has seven picks, so let's go see what happens this year. But I like where they're at, and there is still a ways to go. They still have the draft, and there's always the second wave of free agency after the draft when you're done. And so we'll find out how they fill out the roster from there. The one other thing I think that they need to do, and I think they're going to address, is I believe they need to bring in kicking competition, and that may come late in the draft this year, I think.
Well, or after the draft, because if they only have 5 picks, and, here's the other thing: the back end of the draft. When I talk to people, it's not as strong as it's been in years past because of those NIL deals are keeping guys in school. So the sweet spot for this draft is rounds 2 through 4, really, and maybe into the 5th. But 6 and 7, it's going to be a little bit different there for sure compared to in terms of talent. 2 more things, like Brandon Coleman at right tackle. And here, one thing, I keep trying him right at tackle first because he's got the athleticism. And it's funny because I was talking about this on the podcast yesterday. He does have good height for a tackle. I had the wrong height for him in my head. But he's certainly can play, and he's very athletic. If you can get him to play right tackle, you bolster that side. And while he could move a little bit, he's not as athletic as this kid. And so, and so I think it strengthens that side. Try him there first, see if it works, and then go, because he is a good athlete. What do you think?
Yeah, I left the season like he's a starter. Just where? And so I think they're admitting that. They're going, we're going to try him at right tackle, see
Right.
how it goes. And if that goes that way, great, great. Cosme will come back at some point. Biotis is your center. And then you can think about what left guard looks like full time. Wiley slides in as your swing tackle, maybe spot starter at guard. We'll have to see how they think about it, as Cosme gets better. But I think it's the right thing to do too. And it's the spring. You try it out there, see how it goes, see how it looks. I think he's a starter no matter what. It's
Right.
just a question at what position.
Right. And I always think, it's funny because I understand why some people thought he would be a better guard. I think he'd be a really good guard, but he can be a good tackle too. So which do you value more? And that flexibility with the ability to block in space that he has, I think it makes him very valuable out there. And his body type looks like a guard, but he's got the other qualifications for a tackle. So try him out there for sure. And then with the turnovers, the other thing I'm wondering about, Bram, and we will not know this till the season starts, because we won't see a whole lot in training camp. But can they do more with the group they have up front, and trying to maybe confuse the offenses a little bit more with some more versatility or creativity up front, because the pieces are somewhat, you can do more with some of those pieces. Not that they're necessarily these great players per se, but maybe they have offer a little bit more versatility with what you can do in a scheme, or a coverage call, right? And so that's the other thing, can you help yourself that way? You still need a guy who can go out and just make plays. You do.
Yeah, I agree.
But can you help with that area? And that's one of the things I like that this group does, is that self-scouting, I think, is legit. And I don't know that every coach legit, they might self-scout, but they also might fall in love with what they do even more.
I think they're very deep up front on the defensive line. I like a number of the players they brought in. Kinlaw is the one that if he is a standout, as they believe he's going to be, if he's a standout, then they're going to be in really good shape, But he also, this is what, year 5 for him, and it hasn't happened yet for him.
No.
And I know a lot of it was injuries, but it hasn't happened. So I'll believe it when I see it, and I'll buy them that they know him. And, when we get out there for OTAs, you'll see him. He's freakishly big and fast.
Big.
He looks prototypical, like the guy you do not want to try to block.
Right.
So hopefully, he will turn into what they say he's going to turn into. And I agree, but I still think they're a playmaker away on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
Is that an edge rusher? Is that a corner? Is that a safety? Is that a running back? Is that another receiver? Is that a tight end at some point? They're an explosive player, both sides of the ball away from going, this thing is on, where we're talking about top 5 offense, top 10 defense. Then you start talking about, well, who's going to beat them if that's what it's going to be?
Yeah, no. And I think the good thing for this draft is that there are guys on offense that would fit those categories too.
Yeah.
So, and there are guys on defense that I think this is where, again, you don't have to have an edge guy come in and be a 3-down guy. Have him come in and be a situational guy and help them develop that way. And the pressure isn't all on them. Same thing with a corner. You can bring in a guy, but you don't need him to start. You need him to develop. And that, if you bring in a corner this year and he develops, well, you don't, if Jonathan Jones doesn't work out, well, now you got your replacement next year, right? So that's how you also build a good team, is by having your replacements in-house. And I also think they're still paying for the sins of the past drafts where you don't have talent left over. Like, you had to get rid of the Fidarian Mathises of the world, et cetera, and Jahan Dotson, because they just didn't fit what you wanted and they weren't productive. So they're paying for those sins, and it's they're trying to balance. And one thing, maybe in a future podcast, it's always the building through the draft versus signing some of these 30-year-olds to 1-year deals, which is better. But the best way to go is to get guys that can help you, and also then bring in some more young guys and enough young guys to develop. And it's a hard line. It's a good conversation to have. We don't have enough time to go into that now. So any final thoughts, Bram?
No, I mean, I'm excited with what they have. I think the draft is just where they're picking. It's impossible to predict, but based on what they've done, impossible to predict.
Yes,
A couple of months ago,
That's
I would have said I would have said it's offensive line or edge rusher, period. That's what's going to be. They do that Tunsil trade, and I went, I don't know. Now, board's open now, guys.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's what makes it intriguing. And it's, it's really, we'll get into all the draft talk over the next couple weeks. We'll have some special guests on to talk about the draft. And Bram and I will be doing a series with those stuff, like kind of the making the case for various positions and why, and then bringing people on to talk about those positions who know them a lot better than we do. So anyways, Bram, thanks for joining me. And don't forget to tune into a show as well. And that's it for me. I will be back on Monday with another episode. So I will talk to you next time. Thanks, Bram. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday talking to Tressway, the Commanders punter. Talk to you next time.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years, and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.